Hey guys, welcome back to the McMak Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the 1619 project and what that means to your youngins getting educated. We've got Mr. Isaac Funderburk here today. One of the you're working with the
Tennessee
Tennessee
Stands.
Stands organization.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about a bunch of fun stuff, guys. Get ready to rock and roll. Here we go.
Hello ladies and gents. Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful episode of the Tri-City's most riveting and informative show. Live from the hills of the Appalachians, the McMak Podcast, where your conservative libertarian hosts, Daniel McCrae and McMak talk with you about some of today's most important issues and discuss how they affect you, the freedom-loving citizens of northeastern Tennessee. So, light your cigar, pour a glass of your favorite bourbon, kick up your feet, and get ready to dive right in. This is the McMak Podcast.
And we are back today, ladies and gents. We're actually talking about the 1619 project. What that is, it's an idea. It's an article. It's actually a group of writers, but the main one is a lady named Nicole Hannah-Jones, and she actually wrote an article in the New York Times Magazine. It's actually entitled the 1619 Project, and it actually goes on the premise, or starts the premise that our country didn't start in 1776. It was actually started the first year that slaves were brought here. Isaac, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so before getting ready for this podcast, I actually hadn't read the entire article, just glanced through it, and wasn't exactly sure that was the whole thing. So I kept looking for some essay or book or something to do this, but it's just some relatively short paragraphs in a New York Times article, which surprised me.
How do you how does the 1619 how do you think of a 1619 project coming? Because you're a totally different age than us. We're old now.
Yeah,
and Daniel's slightly older than me, of course, but
yes.
No. Yeah. So how does it make whenever you think of the 1619 project, what does it mean to you? Just summary. What does it mean to you?
Off the top of my head, it means the most recent development in the un-Americanizing of the American mindset now.
Right. De-Americanizing of the culture.
Right. It's the more extreme side of the left of the political spectrum right now. Mm-hmm. I'm homeschooled, or used to be. I'm just recently graduated, moving in college, all that. So
you avoided that. That was great. Good job. Mm-hmm. Congratulations to your parents also.
Mm-hmm. So they survived me.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I was not educated in that. It was never really a problem for me. I've been homeschooled all my life, so I never had that type of influence, done a lot of self-education, and so I knew about all these issues, but it wasn't from a period of trying to teach it to me. It was me learning about them. So that was a very different perspective going into it.
So did they teach you to be racist? So that you're homeschooled, so you avoided this.
They told me to be on time and be logical, things like that, which are very endemically racist.
Very racist things.
Terrible things.
So what just real quick, this is a side topic. What did your parents teach you as far as race issues? I'm sure they taught you slavery was a thing.
They definitely taught me slavery was a thing. Just basic history. I think or hope most Americans would know that this is whenever we first came over here. This is when slavery happened. This is what it looked like in Africa. This is what it looked like in other places around the world, in Europe and in America, and how in America it did last longer than other places. That's an obvious fact. And then how the Harriet Tubman, all the classical figures there, and then the Emancipation, Frederick Douglass, all these people, Civil War, just through the whole history of slavery. They didn't teach us specifically, this is the history of slavery.
This is what you should focus on. This is the whole basis of America. That's what the 1619 Project would do.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to point out to people, though, is, I was talking to a friend earlier, and everyone wants to give the Founding Fathers flack, for not abolishing slavery on the 4th of July. They had so many things that they were worrying about. They were literally, we're out here stretched out. We're a colony. We're just cutting ourselves off. Mm-hmm. And, then all the things, the fires that you have to put out is it's amazing that they were even able to get together and write on a piece of paper, Well,
yeah, but there's a lot of history that a lot of people don't know, man. right after, I mean, like, I want to say 1777, 1778, you had Virginia and a bunch of other northern colonies that are states that were actually pushing against this already.
Right.
So it was already a
But it was
terrible
like
idea
you're trying to
begin with.
you're trying
So
to
it's not like these guys come over and then everybody was like, oh, slavery is great. That's
no.
not how it was.
What I'm saying is like people don't give them credit. Like there's so many things going on.
Sure.
That we're trying to establish a country first.
Right, like from frontier to have an
it's like
government.
Right.
you're cutting yourself off from the largest empire in the world.
You're getting ready to go to war with them.
And you're going to war with these people. It's like, guys, I mean, we can argue about slavery later,
Right.
but it wasn't just in the United States; it was everywhere.
Right.
And also, one thing that people
Brazil, Cuba,
one thing
Jamaica.
that people don't realize, it was only in the 1860s that slavery of a white person was outlawed in England. Slavery of a white slave.
You know that the Slavs, like the Slavs, that actually, like in the Eastern European countries, that means slave.
When was the emancipation of the serfs in Russia? I can't remember when that date was, but
I am
that's
not sure,
basically the same thing.
Serfdom, but people will be like, actual shackles and slaves. People forget, like they were like, oh yeah, white slaves, whatever. No, actual like people who are Irish too. But again, Slavs, especially from Russia, they were slaves and enslaved right next to black people. And that was a thing that they passed the bill, or passed the law in England banning that. At first it was for white people, but I mean, still, they didn't care about Slavs. But anyway, just a little bit of history. Anyway, let's go. We can get back into this.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we actually got an article here by Rich Lowry, and what I've read quite a few articles. Well, I'm going to say not quite a few, but a few articles actually disputing the 1619 project, and this is one of the best ones that I actually come across. So there's a few bullet points, but we're actually going to read these bullet points, and so the first one is leaving out unwelcome facts about slavery. Miss Shannon, you want to read that whole section for us, please?
Sure. So Hannah Jones's account of American slavery is justly excoriating, but it is careful to leave out anything that might even slightly complicate her story or might prove discomforting to the left. They were, Hannah Jones writes, of the first slaves brought to the colonial America, among the 12.5 million Africans who would be kidnapped from their homes and brought in chains across the Atlantic Ocean. She doesn't say who kidnapped them. She refers later to, quote, people stolen from Western and Central Africa. Again, she doesn't say who first stole these people so they could be sent across the Atlantic in chains.
Okay.
So because people have an idea that white people just got on their ships and they went to Africa and then they invaded and just started capturing people.
Okay, but like it says right here, it says the reason that he's asking, why not? Like it or not, it was Africans who captured other Africans and marched them to the coast to be sold to European slavers. African slavery existed before Europeans showed up, and it persisted after they left. This, of course, doesn't make the Middle Passage so excruciatingly awful. It's difficult to even read about. It doesn't make it any better, of course, but it cuts against the impression that she wants to leave out slavery was a uniquely European and especially American phenomenon, which it was.
It was just a world. I mean, in every other point in human history, if you're part of a losing side, you're a slave.
Yeah.
Even in Greece, you have the Spartans enslaving their fellow Greeks.
In Aztecs, we don't cut the hearts out and let the bodies fall down the temple.
Sacrifice them to the sun.
And of course, guys, of course, as we're making these points, slavery is terrible.
Right,
it doesn't matter who does it or where it's done. It is terrible. But we actually, we want to make sure everyone understands that, this nation, the greatest nation on this earth, was not predicated on the fact that we had slaves and, they were everywhere. And it's unfortunate that the African tribes were warring with each other.
It's just human nature.
And actually, capturing people and selling them.
Well, it was very lucrative, yeah. Very lucrative. People wanted slaves.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, well.
There's a whole slave trade.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you were saying. It's not like we actually were sitting there like, oh, well, I think we'll go get some slaves today. There were actually companies set up to do just this.
Yeah, first of all, it wasn't us, too. Whenever we, it's not us. And the thing is, this was part of culture. Whenever people said that if I was born in 1940 in Germany, I never would have been a Nazi. It's like, dude, you don't know because you weren't racism is taught, first of all. So it's like if you grow up believing that, then you don't know, like
You don't know anything else.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So that it was it's been part of human culture forever.
Right.
Anywhere in the Bible you go, there's slaves.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
it's unfortunate, but the good thing about this country is, we had people that were strong enough to literally fight and go to war. Now,
Americans,
granted,
white
yes,
people.
and and I understand the fact that the whole secession point and everything. I understand the reason we went to war because nobody wanted the southern states to secede, but it was over.
It was
in
over.
1860.
Slavery,
Yeah, it was over in 1860. I think it was 1848. The Republican Party was started, and then you got Abraham Lincoln. Won in 1860, and he went in, I think, March 4th of 1861.
Getting rid of your slaves.
Right, and that was his premise,
And yeah,
so.
that's what I mean. Yeah, people can say whatever they want. They can have whatever heritage, with the rebel flag, stuff like that. The Civil War was fought 100% over slavery. I mean, you can name it whatever you want. You
Right.
can say states' rights to have slavery.
That's it, yeah. That's it, man.
I mean, if you think about it too, from their standpoint, they is totally destroying their economy, is what they were saying. They were seeing,
Right.
they weren't seeing it from what's right. So yeah, it was a civil war for the heart and the soul of this country, and the right side won.
Exactly. Of course, man.
But
I think
millions of Americans, soldiers or civilians, they went through some stuff that we never even know about over slavery and to eradicate slavery. So for people to say that this is a racist country, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, man. On down in the article right here, it says, as far back as the mid-15th century, papal bulls granted Portugal the right to enslave sub-Saharan Africans, infidels in West Africa, and could be reduced to perpetual slavery. Taken together, James Sweet writes in a paper on the topic, these papal bulls signaled to the rest of the Christian Europe that the enslavement of sub-Saharan Africans was acceptable and encouraged. Across the Iberian Peninsula, he notes the word negro basically became to mean slave. This is a term and meaning were picked up by Northern Europeans. So it says later on down in the article, it says Hannah Jones says that at the time of the American Revolution, 1/5 of the population within the 13 colonies struggled under a brutal system of slavery unlike anything that existed in the world before. Perhaps she means implicitly to include the rest of the Americas in this condemnation, because everywhere else in the Americas, Brazil, Cuba, and West Indies, etc., had a broadly similar system of slavery. Of course, if she wanted to be clear about this, she would have simply said it. Peter Culkin makes the point in this history, American slavery, 1619 to 1877. The southern United States represented the northernmost outpost, of this plantation system, which reached its apogee of organizational development on the large sugar estates of Jamaica, St. Domingue, later called Haiti, Cuba, and other Caribbean colonies. Which brings me to another point. Do you think these slavery guys were globalists? Maybe.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I heard somebody make this, just talk about globalism now and America first and everything else. These guys right here, they had all these slaves in other countries, and they were probably getting from the same company. You know what I'm
I
saying?
watched some documentary. They go through the whole thing of the slave. I mean, it's just buying and selling.
I mean, it still goes on today. I mean,
yeah, it's different.
In Libya, I mean, it's different. But
It's serfdom, really. It's
Yeah.
serfdom. I mean, he was talking about, Russia. It's different name. It doesn't look exactly the same,
Still
but it
pretty
is.
similar in some parts of China.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, especially. Yeah, if you even want to call them, yeah, I guess that's what you would call them. I mean, you're forcing them to labor, and people are so worried about this. You don't hear the Uyghurs don't have a voice at all.
a lot of North Korean escapees are through slavery into China.
Yeah. So let's go down to the. Let's see here. If you want to go ahead, pick up on that paragraph right there. It says it's not to deny the brutality of slavery. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not to deny the brutality of slavery in colonial America, to note what would seem to most observers the even more hideously inhumane nature of slavery in, say, Brazil and the Caribbean islands, where slaves were literally worked to death and had to be constantly replenished by new imports. Brazil and the Caribbean, Colchin notes, were graveyards for Africans and their descendants. Jamaica, for example, imported a total of more than 750,000 Africans, but at the time of the emancipation in 1834, its slave population stood at only 311,000. Hannah Jones would probably say to all of this, there you go, denying American exceptionalism again. No, the point is, counter to her and other critics of the American founding, that it wasn't slavery that set us apart. Both Brazil and the United States had slavery. Only one of them had the Constitution and Declaration of Independence.
Right. So that's the thing. It's unfortunate, through history, as you were talking about earlier, Isaac, that they actually stopped slavery in other parts of the world before we did. In those areas.
They had time to sit around and think about. I mean, they're not. Their country isn't on fire. That's what I'm saying. They
Right.
didn't. People, in the United States, they had so many things to worry about. And cutting their I mean, yes, get rid of slavery. I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to start a country, you're like, oh, well, no, let's cut our knees out from under, because you already have a economic system. I mean, and it has to involve the slaves. And, the history of whenever the Emancipation Proclamation happened, now you have a bunch of people who don't have any way to sustain themselves because they were slaves, they were getting fed.
Right. And
Now
it
they
was
don't.
Like quarter acre and a mule, was it?
Yeah.
I forgot how much it was.
Whatever the situation is, like, how do you feed yourself now? So you just destroy your economy, basically, no matter what, immediately. So, you had to get some things in place first. So these other countries, like in England, they've already got an economy. They've got, whatever. Doesn't matter. What I'm saying is the United States, people need to give them more credit for.
Right. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the second bullet point is that this gentleman actually talks about is called smearing the revolution. It says, according to Hannah Jones, conveniently left out of our founding mythology is the fact that one of the primary reasons the colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain was because they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. This is preposterous. It isn't left out of our founding mythology because it's inconvenient, but because it's untrue. So the reference here, presumably, is to the colonial upset over the 1773 Somerset decision. In England, an historian, Alan Taylor, explains in his recent book, The American Revolution, an American slave owner took a slave to England and then tried to send him on to Jamaica. The slave, James Somerset, petitioned for his freedom. A British court ruled that slavery wasn't supported under the natural law and required an enactment of positive law. With no such law existing in Britain, Somerset was a free man. The colonists feared the consequence, but there is nothing in the writings of the revolutionaries to suggest that this episode ranked anywhere close to the importance to their discontent. So pretty much what you got a gentleman, I guess, that went over to England, and I guess England, I guess you couldn't have slaves at the time, and then so I guess the guy was smart enough to take it to a court and was like, hey, I mean, good for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they set up the Somerset, but I've already read this article, quite a few times. But it says right here, the point is worth emphasizing, by the way, that it was royal policy at this time to oppose any colonial efforts to crimp the slave trade. King George III urged the royal government of Virginia, upon the pain of highest displeasure, to assent to no law by which the importation of slaves should be in any respect prohibited or obstructed. So it looks like you got the monarchy there, the king actually saying, "Nah, man, you got to keep the slavery going."
Well,
but the law system is saying, "No,
This
that's
is
not the way to go."
before the United States is set up. This is still under British rule.
Yeah. This is actually this is
after the emancipation in England.
it's in
England.
It's in 1773.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I mean, we still
that's
haven't broken
before
off yet.
1776.
Yeah, still haven't broken off yet. So you actually see that over in Europe, they were
They
having
want it.
problems.
Of course, they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the difference. You got, the people, in the courts, and then you got the monarchy, actually, I guess, going at each other, saying, King George is like, hey, let's keep the slave thing going, but the courts,
as long as we don't see it, it's okay.
Right.
As long as it's over there across
Yeah,
the
they're-
Right.
yeah.
pond there.
right,
Yeah.
So, and then it says down here, it says that as it happens, the logic of the Somerset decision, in the absence of the positive enactment, the natural state is freedom, eventually proved enormously useful to the abolitionists in the United States. James Oakes writes in Freedom National, Somerset became the benchmark for all subsequent efforts to end slavery by political means, as it should. As it should. So, so you got distorting the Constitution. This is bullet point 3. It says, understandably, Hannah Jones spends a lot of time on the compromises related to slavery at the Constitutional Convention. The Constitution, she writes, protected the property of those who enslaved black people. This one right here, this bullet point right here, it kind of gets a little technical, but it's actually wordage. and it's kind of
Well,
it's almost like the most moot point
well, yeah,
of this.
that's what people say is, it gave rights to white people. It didn't give any rights to black people,
Right.
and that's, I mean,
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's almost legalese right here. So we'll get into this. It says, the Constitution she writes protected the property of those who enslave black people. This is shamefully dishonest. With the quote marks around property, she evidences 250 years later that the work of the founders who specifically insisted on excluding the word in any reference to slavery. The Constitution refers to slaves not as property, but as persons held in service. Subtle distinction, although one with profound implications. It says, as James Oakes recounts, during the deliberations, Roger Sherman opposed a tax on slave imports because it implied that they were property. James Madison took Sherman's side, elaborating in his notes from the convention that he believed it wrong to admit in the Constitution the idea that there could be property in men, he added. Slaves are not like merchandise consumed. Sean Wiles explains in his appropriately titled book, No Property in Men, that the convention took care to ensure that while the Constitution would accept slavery where it already existed, it would not validate slavery in national law.
that's what I was gonna say. Is like people who had been freed, though, then
Right.
however difficult their lot in life was, they still had the same rights. And I mean, in any other human situation or in civilization, that was the same situation. It's like if you were a slave, you were born into slavery, whatever. But
Yeah, it's
then
almost
if
like
you
a
had,
like a caste system.
it's
Almost.
yeah, and they knew that if you've been freed, then it's different.
Yeah.
And I mean, it still wouldn't be easy, I'm sure, but
Yeah. So one of the on down, you got the Constitution.
that is good. I've never thought about that. That they don't, in the
Right.
Constitution, they never address slavery specifically because they didn't
Right.
want it to be part of the.
Well, I mean, you've got all men are created equal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
And
saying?
they say it's referred to as persons held in service, so they're recognizing that they are people, and the Constitution does address people. So
Yeah.
technically, they are
Right.
protected under
And
the
that's
same rights.
and honestly,
They probably thought about
I will
that.
I will say this. I do agree with in the 1619 project. She actually talks about the hypocrisy of the
They're
Constitution.
definitely hypocrites.
Well,
but-
yeah, I mean, because the fact that it actually says, all men are created equal under God, and et cetera, and they were actually trying to free themselves from England while they were actually holding slaves. So I actually agree with her on that thought process.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They would destroy their economy.
Right,
Or,
but just like anybody, any of the revisionists, like we were talking about, they actually want to take a point and manipulate it and twist it to the point to where it actually takes away from the whole, like your 30,000-foot view. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and
that's what she does with that.
also
so.
too, people forget that each one of these states was very independent. Like each one of these states, I mean, if you go back and read the Federalist Papers, it's literally a bunch of countries, like how the United States is supposed to be,
Right.
a bunch of countries, and they're in a federation to protect themselves. And if you're going around, because the northern states didn't have a lot of slaves, the
Right.
southerns did. So it's like you're trying to get everyone to fight together. You're probably not going to go around telling everyone, "Hey, you got to free your slaves." But they did such good wordage in the Constitution that everything could be. I mean, as America progressed, they allowed it. I mean, it's just such
Yeah, I mean,
linguistical.
yeah.
Yeah, it was like back in the Greek days. You have all these different city-states, like in the
Yeah,
United States,
right.
all these different
City
states. And you have
states.
to get the Athens and the Spartans to work together. You're gonna have to
Right.
have some sort of
Yes.
Right.
document that they can all agree
Well,
on.
I
just to
mean,
make this
the
work.
federal government was actually, I guess, brought up, by the states. That's another thing that most people forget. The only reason that the federal government actually exists is because the states actually allowed them to exist.
That's in the Federalist Paper. They talk about the Achaean League, which is what you're talking about, the Athens and Spartans. And they had to fight together. They didn't like each other,
Right.
but again, to protect ourselves against England, you have to work together. And then once you get it stabilized, then you can put on all your other stuff.
Right. So back to the article, you got John Quincy Adams. He's actually before the Supreme Court here in the Amistad case. It says the Constitution of the United States recognizes the slaves held within some of the states of the unions only in their capacity of persons held to labor or service in a state under the laws thereof, persons constituting elements or representation in the popular branch of the national legislature, persons the migration or importation of whom should not be prohibited by Congress prior to the year 1808. The Constitution nowhere recognizes them as property. The words slave and slavery are studiously excluded from the Constitution. Circumlocution, are the fig leaves under which these parts of the body politic are decently concealed. Slaves, therefore, in the Constitution of the United States are recognized only as persons enjoying rights and held to the performance of duties. So, I mean, yeah, there goes, there they go with the legalese again. You know what I'm saying?
But they did a good job, the importation is like, it's kind of like how they've kind of tried to phase out cigarettes. It's
Right,
like, they,
right.
you
Well,
did, if you just say that,
right.
if you say it's
Well,
illegal immediately, then,
That's the thing. That's the thing about the federal government or a republic is you incrementally phase out things. So that's what they were trying to do.
well, yeah, and then the Constitution, all men, and then it's like, okay. So now whenever we start thinking about it more, it's like, oh, wait, these guys are men too.
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, the United States has never lived up to the Constitution.
No.
But we are a country of laws.
Yeah.
And we have to do our best because I say that people aren't perfect, but principles are.
Let's think about that thought for a second, though, Isaac. That's actually a really good point. But the simple fact of the matter, I'm glad that we have this document that's over 250 years old. The simple fact of the matter, we can't actually get there. Actually, just shows the importance of that document, and we've been actually fighting to get there the whole time. And it gives us something to strive for. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to get complacent.
It's a moral thing. It's a spiritual thing,
Right.
And that people try to apply more and more government to it. George Washington says that this country, not verbatim, this country doesn't work unless you have people who are moral.
Right. And
We
the
wouldn't
thing,
need this if we were all angels.
well, you got John Adams. He spoke about Christianity. You got John.
They're all Christian.
John Quincy Adams, which was his son, spoke about Christianity. George Washington spoke about it. So there's a lot of our founding fathers. A lot of people don't believe that our founding fathers were Christians, but I mean, I actually listened to a gentleman the other day. History is like his thing. I'm not exactly sure what he does, but he actually spoke at the church that I was at, and he was actually just nailing off these quotes. That John Quincy Adams and John Adams and all these historical figures would actually wrote down in their journals and stuff like that regarding Christianity and the moral.
And people, if you go back to the Bible, Jesus never talks about setting your slaves free. So it's more of loving people. And there were slaves in the Bible. It's not, again, people have to get out of the culture thing. It's like it's a mentality. It's like we've never been in a place where slaves were a thing. So that was everyday existence. So it's just something we can't even conceive.
The last 100 years or so is an anomaly in world history.
Yeah, it really is. Every other point in history has been dark and gloomy,
Right.
basically.
But guess who's leading the way? That'd be us.
Yeah.
In
In the light, right?
Right, exactly. So, next bullet point against the 1619 Project, misrepresenting the founding era. Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. In her rendering, Hannah Jones skips from America's independence to the hardening of the racial caste system. She thus excises the liberalization of the slave regime that attended the revolution because it too is inconvenient to her narrative. The liberalization wasn't a minor phenomenon. It was a key element of the revolutionary period, driven by the obvious tension between the founders' ringing calls for liberty and their worry that the British wanted to reduce them to slaves and the slave system itself. Colchin writes, the revolutionary era witnessed the first major challenge to American slavery. Almost overnight, it seemed, an institution that had long been taken for granted came under intense scrutiny and debate. Critics questioned its efficacy and morality, proponents rushed to its defense, and thousands of slaves took advantage of wartime turmoil to flee their bondage. Tangible results of this challenge included the abolition of slavery in the North, a sharp increase in the number of free blacks in the Upper South, and the ending of the American slave trade. It says Vermont began a gradual abolition in 1777, with Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey following suit between 1780 and 1804. Wow, imagine that.
Yeah.
How can any remotely honest account of America and slavery leave these acts out and not even mention them in the clause or parenthetically? Sean Willens calls it, to that point, the largest emancipation in modern history, and crucial departure from all later anti-slavery activity would follow. So that's before anyone else is releasing slaves. Because in England, it only happened in the 1800s. This is talking about in the 1700s, in the late 1700s.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point that I wanted to get to earlier is like ever since the actual birth of this nation, since the Declaration of Independence, people have been fighting against slavery. You know, it's unfortunate that
in different states too. It wasn't just. I mean, these people are doing it in different places.
I mean, you know, it was something that's always been fought against. You know, and from an American. As an American institution or American standpoint, because we all know it's not right. You know, so our founders, you know, were actually, well, hey, you know, we got this going on, so people are actually starting to look at it. So you know, like we said in 1777, we got states actually fighting against it.
And also too, the whole thing about the 1619 project. That is the right name, right?
Yeah.
It's just it doesn't have any actual correlation to history, so or reality. But anyway, the whole thing about that is it's also critical race theory into it. So everything about everything in U.S. history is going to be turned. It's going to be like every point about anything is going to be looked at from a standpoint of slavery, and then looked at it from the standpoint of oppression to black people. Every single thing in history. That's the difference too. It's not just rewriting your history like when you started. It's rewriting every single moment in history from a standpoint of, yeah, they did that because they're racist. Every single thing. And that's what people are missing. That's going to be in their kids' textbooks. That's what they're learning. They're learning that every moment in U.S. history has to do with oppression of black people.
And it's not something that's obvious in this version of critical theory, but obviously going back to Marxism, everything was classified by economic class. And Marx was one of the first philosophers during that time to turn from the classical Western tradition of individualism and essentially being your free will, having the ability to create your own path in life, and instead your environment shapes you. So that was in the class form in this case. In this case, it's race. So from their viewpoint, you can look at it as this is the only way to interpret past because you're created within the system. You're not an individual actor making your own decisions necessarily. You are imbued in this collective mindset that where your environment shapes you all the time.
You have no choice.
It's not the same choice. It's not. You don't have a spirit in there with free will and where you can critically think through things. You're a byproduct of your environment, of your teachers, and of your race. In their view, that's the critical piece. That's the foundational piece of how you look.
But that in itself, that idea process, that thought process is a form of oppression. You know what I'm saying?
It dehumanizes people,
right? And you know that. I mean, that's just a form of oppression too. So I mean, you know,
They don't know that.
Right.
They don't see.
Well, I mean, but when you get to people like Marxism and stuff like that, you know, you had the bourgeois elite, and then you had the proletariat.
Right.
You know, I mean, but it has to be forced on people. You know, and that's the thing. If something actually works, it doesn't have to be forced. It should be natural. You know what I'm saying? People should actually want it.
Well, you get enough, you force enough, or you know, a few people, and then everyone else naturally will go along with it.
Yeah, but you know that's.
Once you storm the Kremlin and you kind of take control of the government, then
they didn't have.
You have the seat of power.
No going back on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
and then you kill the whole Romanov family. Yeah.
Yeah.
We executed the family.
Well, I mean, you know, I understand that, but you know, it's just at least in capitalism, you know, you actually have a chance of actually bettering yourself. You know, there's this.
Yeah, it's the supply and demand, sacrifice, and
I talked to Natalia, the lady that we had on from Russia. There's a big, I don't know, I guess it's like a story that comes from Russia, and it's about a command economy, and where it's where they had at the beginning of the revolution, you know, they actually had pharmacists, you know, who were told to be farmers.
Yeah, they just send people wherever.
And the thing about it is, it was the rural people, the farmers, that were actually fighting against them. So they actually went out and killed them. And they're like, oh, well, we need farmers now.
Yeah,
and
no one knows how to do this.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, they actually, there's a story where they actually made a pharmacist. You're a farmer now.
Yeah.
And guess what? They couldn't do it, and millions of people died of starvation. You know, so I mean that's what happens.
The same thing has happened in China and Cambodia with their
Maoism,
and ruralization. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
they'll just make people move places, and you do this now. I'm like, bro, I don't.
Right. So, those are good points. But back to the article, it says culture recounts other elements of the liberalizing tendency. In 1776, the Second Continental Congress passed a resolution opposing slave imports. And around this time, several states banned them. Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware loosened restrictions on manumission. And Congress in 1784 came within one vote of prohibiting slavery in the Western territories. It appeared for a while, Culture and Rights,
In
as if the very
1776.
yeah, it appears the very survival of slavery in the new nation was threatened. Of course, it wouldn't be. There was backsliding in the South that grew worse over time. In the antebellum period, a more aggressive, positive defense of slavery arose in the accompanying tightening of slave laws, both of which foreshadowed the Civil War. The secession of the South spoke indeed of a distinctly American element in the story of modern slavery as culture and rights. Nowhere else did the defense of slavery turn into a veritable pro-slavery crusade as it did in the United States. Nowhere else did slave owners refuse to accept emancipation and go to war to preserve their interests. In their hour of crisis, masters elsewhere grumbled, growled, and dragged their heels, but ultimately they reluctantly went along with the decision taken by central governments to convert to free labor. In the southern United States, slaveholders determined that they would rather fight than switched. This proved to be ultimate undoing of slavery, exactly because an anti-slavery North, the predicates of which Hannah Jones elides or distorts, was prepared to resist. So, I mean, like we've said multiple times, ever since 1776, the Declaration of Independence, there's been a faction of people here in this country that knew slavery was wrong and was pushing against it. I mean, like I'm saying, to the point to where you're going to go to war.
Yeah.
I mean, and these guys, man, they were doing like skirmish lines. I'm talking getting 75, 100 yards from people, pointing guns at you, shooting at you, knowing you're going to get hit. The likelihood.
You know what's crazy too, though, is it goes back to a lot of people actually had a lot of faith back then.
Oh yeah.
Compared to now, is like no one wants to get hurt standing up for things.
Yeah.
But back then, people sacrificed their life because they knew that first of all, people didn't have it easy. Like, people had it really rough.
Uh-huh.
Like,
sure.
people were dying from disease, and barely, people are literally just happy to be alive enough and have enough to eat and be
Just live
married,
by
have
60.
kids. Exactly.
Yeah.
They were all roughing it, whoever you were, unless you were just a rich person, of course. But even them, compared to what we have now.
Yeah. The worst person, the poorest person in this country now has it better than, I'm going to say, like Rockefeller did, like in the early 1900s.
You're like a god now. You can just press a button on your phone and communicate with someone in China. Like, really?
I mean, Rockefeller back then, they didn't have air conditioning.
Exactly.
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
The
But-
Vanderbilt mansion's great, but
Yeah.
when you go inside it and realize,
It's
Yeah.
like, I'd rather have my life.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
But so whenever people were willing to lay their lives on the line, like, they knew that they're going somewhere else. That they knew that they what they were fighting for was worth, sacrificing their body, because this is only a brief existence, and that's a lot of people lose sight on that too. It's like
Right.
today
Right.
it's easy to lose sight today.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point, man. Everybody's just worried. We are in this consuming economy. Consumption. That's the only thing that's our God. You know what I'm saying?
It is.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because I think that's the major problem that we have in the society.
Because otherwise, if everyone was focused on their soul,
Right.
then no one would be no one would be telling
People-
everyone that they're racist.
People would be
And-
acting a whole lot different. Every idle word you have to have an account for.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there you go. I think this next bullet point is actually one of the most important, though, and it actually brings the political aspects
This is
into light.
Hannah Jones already.
Yeah.
Hannah Jones treats at some length Lincoln's notorious August 1862 meeting with the prominent free blacks in the White House. In keeping with his longtime support of colonization, the president lectured them on the need for blacks to remove themselves from the country. Your race suffers very greatly, many of them, by living among us, while ours suffers from your presence, he said. In a word, we suffer on each side. He noted that Congress had appropriated funding to transport blacks to a colony. All true enough, but consider once again what Hannah Jones leaves out. She mentions that Lincoln was considering issuing the Emancipation Proclamation at this time, but she ignores the plausible interpretation of various Lincoln scholars that the meeting was a public relations feint. meant to soften political opposition in the Union to emancipation. As Oakes relates, Lincoln was high-handed and uninterested in the views of his guests, a contrast to his respectful treatment of other black leaders. He put a heavy emphasis in the meeting on the gap between the races when usually he belittled racial differences. He invited a reporter to record the proceedings, a departure from his usual practice, to ensure that his comments appeared instantly in the newspapers. Colonization was a common way for opponents of slavery to try make their views more palatable to prejudiced public opinion. It would have been better, of course, if this hadn't been necessary, but the abolitionists and other opponents of slavery were trying to make gains in the 19th century America as it existed. That's kind of going back to what we were talking about. Lincoln continued to pursue colonization until a small experiment failed miserably. Sometime in 1864, he dropped the idea. By the end of the war, he was talking about limited black suffrage. So he's talking about black people voting. As for his dealings with black leaders, it does him a profound disservice to neglect his relationship with Frederick Douglass. In 1864, in the second meeting together at the White House, Lincoln worried that he might lose his re-election and the Democrats would negotiate a peace that kept blacks enslaved in the South. Convinced that blacks once freed couldn't be re-enslaved, he asked Douglass to find a way to further spread the word of emancipation in the South and get as many slaves to the Union line as possible. After Lincoln's second inaugural, Douglass joined the procession to visit the president at the reception at the White House, even though a black man had never been part of such a gathering. Detained at the gate, he asked an acquaintance to tell Lincoln he was there. Swiftly admitted, Lincoln told the crowd, "Here comes my friend Douglass," and insisted on hearing Douglass's opinion of his speech. "Mr. Lincoln, that was a sacred effort." In a eulogy of Lincoln that Douglass delivered at the Cooper Institute, he described Lincoln as emphatically the black man's president. He was the first of the long line to show any respect to the rights of the black man, or to acknowledge that he had any rights the white man ought to respect. There was agreement on this, by the way, from the other side of the divide in the North. Copperhead attack on Lincoln the year before had put it almost exactly the same in the exact same term.
Just so you guys know, the Copperheads were a group of Northern Democrats that actually did not want the country to go to war. So they were, I thought that was really weird. So I looked that up so everybody would know. I was like, "You got bit by a Copperhead? What happened, man?"
Yeah, I was
like,
wondering.
You zigged when you should have zagged, bro. No.
This is, when did we ever have a president that made so much of the Negro or was willing to take him into his private and social circles as Abraham Lincoln does? Mr. Lincoln is emphatically the black man's president and the white man's curse. What act has the president ever done in his official capacity, trace it out to its legitimate ends, that has been beneficial to our country or to the white man? Not one, and we defy contradiction. Now we're going to get the other side of it.
Well, Hannah Jones just apparently, she begs to differ. I mean, she thinks that Lincoln was not for the black man, but you guys can actually go read that article. It says, to reiterate, none of this is to deny America's considerable sins, which means, that's definitely slavery. The reality of our shortcomings is bad enough that no one focusing on slavery or racial discrimination should feel compelled to distort the record. The lines of Samuel Huntington are apt. Critics say that America is a lie because reality falls so short of its ideals, which is exactly what you were talking about earlier, because we have not lived up to the Constitution. It's a very good point, Isaac. They are wrong. America is not a lie. It's a disappointment, but it can be a disappointment only because it also has hope, because we haven't given up. We've made such strides. As a country to, give people freedom and to give them a way to improve themselves, everybody.
The only place in the world that's ever happened.
And what trips me out is, you've got people willing to come here illegally, and
because I have a better life here illegally, being off the record.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, if this is such a terrible place, why are they coming here illegally?
Yeah, and these are many of them right now are from South America or Central America, which means they are, according to the left, they're part of the marginalized underdogs, and they're moving out of somewhere where everyone looks like them to a place where, according to the left, they are the oppressed ones. Why would they?
Why would they? I mean, it's a lateral move.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
it's
saying?
actually a downward move because you're moving into.
I
In their
guess,
view,
yeah.
that is the
Yeah.
that is the critical divide is white and non-white.
Yeah.
And so they're moving to an area where it's dominated in their view by whites from one where it's not.
Good
So
point.
that's
It was
actually
funny.
That's a very good
Most of
point.
those people also have conservative, like Latin America has
yeah.
conservative values.
Yeah,
They're just, a lot of them are tricked.
yeah.
Ah, vote for the
Alright, so-
Democrats.
Yeah, so back to the article. This gets at the crux of the matter. The American past has had its share of both hypocrisy and nobility. Truthfulness demands that we acknowledge both. Americans were hypocrites in extolling the liberty and grounding our national identity to a significant extent in it, while at the same time tolerating or even embracing slavery. I do agree with that. But over time, the principles and rhetoric of freedom proved powerful tools against slavery. The stakes in getting this right are large. If they succeed in making America only about the hypocrisy, the architects of the 1619 Project will deny the country's nobility to the rising generation. They will have made America, in Huntington's terms, a lie pure and simple, and enshrined their own hostile, mythologized account of our history.
In which they can only spread their lies in a place where people are not persecuted for the things that they. I mean, we're going to forget about every other aspect of the Constitution, also, right? So,
Right.
Bill of Rights, forget all that, because
Well-
that's not important.
That's a very good point, because we were actually talking about that before. So let's think about this for a second. Let's say the 1619 Project, it is what has changed to the beginning. Let's just say, for instance, which I don't think it'll ever be, but let's say you take away the Constitution, okay? So you got the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which a war was actually fought, to free slavery, and those are considered the slavery time amendments to the Constitution. You wouldn't have those.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So think about this for a second. You wouldn't have the Second Amendment. And it's just like I asked Isaac earlier. Think about this for a second. If slaves in America could own a gun, would they have been slaves? No. I would say I say that's a big goose egg on that one. So I mean, I don't think you.
We'll never know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not getting rid of mine.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, we can do whatever, but you're not taking my guns.
Right. But the thing about it. So I mean, if they actually take it and
Yeah,
change,
think about that. Yeah, no other. I was listening
Right.
to someone talk. They were saying, what other place on earth? There's no other place on earth, maybe except for Switzerland. I think that if you go into someone else's home, you even think about the fact that you might get shot. Except for the United States. That's the only place, except for
It's like a
Switzerland.
slight tap on the wrist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, the only places where you have guns, and the reason is the reason that the government just doesn't go in and take whatever they want or do whatever is because they might get shot.
Okay, now let's take that point. Let's take that point right there, and let's look at it now. Coming to today, who's trying to take your guns away? Same people who had slaves, same political party.
I haven't done full circle on that before. That's funny.
Well, I'm just saying.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
Well,
that's-
people. The problem that people do too is they attribute the civil rights movement to the Democrats, and that was all. We saw what happened to someone who's trying to do civil rights. That he got shot. That's
Yeah.
what happened. He came in. No one knew that he was going to do that. No one knew in the Democratic Party. He wooed them, and then he got in there, and they was like, "Hey guys, we're going to switch this around. We're going to give some civil rights to people."
Right.
And then he got killed.
Yeah.
And then, because they couldn't go back on it,
Right.
Lyndon B. Johnson
He pushed it through.
pushed it through, and
Yeah.
then now they switch. Everyone's like, "No, we're the party of civil rights." No, you weren't, bro. You killed it. Like
Yeah.
you guys killed the guy who's for civil rights, and then you just.
And actually, that's another thing. That's funny because I was reading an article today. I was actually trying to do some research, but Dinesh D'Souza already proved this. They talk about the great switch that happened during the 50s and 60s.
That's what happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dinesh D'Souza, in one of his documentaries, actually did some very good work on this, and it's very few have actually switched, and on a federal level.
What do you mean?
In history, from the switch, the great switch where all the Democrats became Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not true. I think back in 2016, I believe, or 2015, when his documentary come out, I think he said it was less than 10, I believe, that actually had switched.
Well,
on a federal
and a
level.
lot of people too. They cling to old school Democrat. Like, bro, you shouldn't be old school Democrat. What's good about old school Democrat?
I mean, that's the party of the Ku Klux Klan.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a party of slavery.
But then the only way that they can justify it though is because of civil rights. That's literally the only way. But it's like, you guys realize that not one Democrat suggested any civil rights bills, not
This is
women's
why no one
suffrage.
should ally themselves with political
Yeah.
parties or with people, ideas,
Yeah.
principles.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And
They're just uneducated people, and they don't want they're a lot of them are tied to their lineage. They're like, don't call my ancestors racist, stuff like that. And it's the same people who fly, rebel flags. They don't understand the history. You wouldn't be doing that if you cared about your black neighbor. I mean, honestly,
yeah.
I understand you're sons of the Confederacy. That's fine. Your heritage, and you're, opposing the federal government, which, I oppose the federal government too. But, we were missing the point of why it happened.
Yeah,
'Cause-
you can't. Yeah, man, you can't. I can't. Like I said, I in the past, I can't support any ideology that is going to judge someone on the color of their skin,
Right.
or make them stigmatized because of their melanin content.
Well,
I'm
you
sorry.
you still hear the argument. Oh, well, it was over states' rights again. States' rights to do what?
have slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a state right. Yeah, but
Nah, man.
that's the one.
Nah, man. And that's a cultural problem that we got today, man. It's weird. It's like we're regressing as a society,
Yeah.
and it trips me out.
Well, it's a lot of people are not going to change their ideology because again, you're telling them that their family's racist. They can't take that, or
Right.
it's not that they're bad. They might not have been necessarily bad people. You're taught racism.
A
You're
lot of
taught
people just
it.
don't think
Okay.
about it. Like we have a lot of people who are pro-abortion in this nation right now, and they just don't think about it.
Yeah, there's
And
over
hopefully
600.
Later, 50 years down the road, we'll have woken up and realized, okay, this is a bad thing. In hindsight, we'll say, why is half the country evil? But most people just
It
don't
doesn't
think
mean
about
it
it.
doesn't mean they're evil. Yeah, they
Right.
just haven't thought
just
like
haven't
what
thought
you're
about
saying. They just haven't
Which
thought
they
about
should.
it.
That's a problem. But
Yeah.
Right.
They just no, yeah. They it's something that you can go and get done in your spare time.
Uh-huh.
There's over 600,000 babies are killed every year in legal abortions. That's in the clinic. That's not the ones that take the Plan B pill or the ones who do, stuff outpatient. That's just the legal documented ones that are surgical in office. 600,000.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
over six, it's like six. I don't want to give a false number, but it's like 600 and whatever. That was in 2016. And however large that number is for abortions, again the Plan B pill and stuff like that. Yeah, and we're worried about COVID.
Yeah.
You just killed 600,000 Americans every year.
Hopefully, in hindsight, this will be seen as, I think
Yeah.
currently top world leaders that killed the most people is Mao, Stalin, and Hitler. And hopefully, if people wake up, then this abortion will be over.
Well, in the 20th century, what entities actually killed more people than anything? Governments.
government. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the truth. But
The reason that they haven't been able to do that in the United States is because we have guns.
yeah.
I mean, literally.
Yeah.
That's why Mao was able to do what he did because, the people didn't have arms.
Well, I
you
mean-
give them arms to do what you
Well,
want.
I mean, what did he say about democracy? What did he say verbatim about democracy? It comes out of the barrel of a gun. That's what he said. That's a quote from Mao. Yeah.
That
So
one.
Yeah, and people have to, that's the thing is people have to be able to. It's just you don't have to ever shoot anybody. You don't ever have to shoot your gun. You can get a shotgun and you can be a terrible shot with it. You know that one end will go boom, but the point of having it is,
Everybody else knows that and goes boom
yeah,
too. So they'll
yeah,
stay away.
exactly. So
Yeah.
if someone tries to then come to you and force upon you their will,
right.
regardless of who it is, whether it's another person or if it's your government, they're less likely to do it, especially whenever you have, because once they get shot with that, they're not coming back, and,
Right.
and it's so basic, it's not like you can really,
So
it's not, it's timeless.
So let's. Hopefully, you got that one article pulled up. I gave you two more regarding Miss Hannah Jones. So, these two articles actually come out. Do we have the one pulled up where she actually refused?
She's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist.
Yeah, I was surprised about how little information was in that article.
Yeah, she doesn't give any, well, I'm sure
Just
she
a bunch of
doesn't.
statements, not
Well-
very many.
No, that's what they do for news anymore. It's pundits. It's pundits, and then no actual news.
Right. So, well, what happened was she actually Well, she actually was going to do legal action against UNC because she didn't get tenure for her job, which they gave her, I guess, a contract for 5 years, and then they would actually look at renewing it then. But anybody who's actually gotten that job before her, it's a Knight's chair position. It actually comes with tenure. So she was saying that the university was being racist against her. But here's the point. And you know, she actually, but before she actually took legal action, there's an article that come out yesterday. I actually sent it to you guys. She actually refused the position.
What is the name of that? Because it didn't come through.
It's actually in your phone. Let's see here.
Just Google the title.
Yeah, just look up Hannah Jones refuses tenure position. Just look that up. But anyway, so let's think about. Take this to court, right? So, and then, you know, doing all this to get her tenured position, why do you think that she did not want to go through with it?
Well,
back
let's
away?
see what it says down
Okay,
further.
that's fine.
What does it say?
Well, it's excellent press for her, for one thing.
Let's scroll down.
So scroll down.
Yeah.
Let's read it.
Okay.
It says Pulitzer Prize winner journalist Nicole Hannah Johns has turned down a tenure offer from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and will instead accept a position at Howard University, of course, the historically black institute in Washington, D.C. She made the announcement Tuesday in an interview on CBS this morning, telling host Gayle King that she decided to decline the offer of tenure from UNC, her alma mater. It was a difficult decision, not a decision I wanted to make, Hannah Jones said. Instead, I'm going to be the inaugural Knight Chair in Race and Journalism at Howard University.
Okay.
She will join. Oh gosh.
Acclaimed writer Taneshi
Yeah,
Coates.
that guy.
Yeah.
You know, I bought the. Unfortunately, I bought the Captain America copy that had Jordan Peterson as the Red
saw
Skull.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't opened it, but yeah, they make him basically Satan.
Oh, really?
But yeah, they turn it everything that he stands for, conservative values and telling the truth.
Wow.
But yeah, he's the guy. They have him writing Marvel stuff, and that's why all these Marvel movies like that it used to be awesome. You know, they're all communist. They're all telling you that everyone's racist. And I mean, even if you watch The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I got to episode 3 before it's like too much. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, Captain America. You know, they made him black now, and then also
I haven't watched anything after Endgame, so I don't know what's
yeah.
happening.
So exactly, so Captain America's gone. They have to find a new one. They make the Falcon or in the comic books, they make the Falcon Captain America. I haven't watched past it. It's just like so much like, oh, you know, because of racism, and they have to have a whole episode dedicated to, you know, it's like, dude, this is a kids show, or like this is for kids. You know, they're gonna totally make this political. It's the same. It's the same thing in every single thing that's Hollywood now because of communist China.
It's a re-education effort.
Right.
It's people don't think about it. They're re-educating your kids through freaking cartoons.
Yeah.
They don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why you should homeschool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And
Yeah.
Or private schools fine too.
or private. Well, yeah, it depends on what they teach.
Yeah.
But like the Ta-Nehisi Coates, yeah, he's literally the comic book writer for Captain America,
Yeah.
and he's racist.
So it says he'll be a faculty member at the flagship College of Arts and Sciences, and Hannah Jones will be a tenured faculty member at the Kathy Hughes School of Communications. She will also be the founder of the Center for Journalism and Democracy, which will help train and equip aspiring journalists with investigative skills and historical and analytical expertise needed to cover the crisis our democracy is facing, the school said.
So basically, we know that if you want your kids to be racist, send them to Howard University.
Well, you know, here's the thing. So this is just my opinion. This is speculation, guys. So, you know, she actually went and was got a law team and was actually going to go after UNC, right? And then she backed away.
So tenure, for people who don't know, tenure means that you're guaranteed pay until you retire, no matter what you say or do.
So let's just say we just read an article that actually disputed her points rather effectively, I thought. So let's say you get that with a bunch of historians on the defensive side from UNC and actually pick her paper apart. Do you think that she's willing to do that?
You think that she stood down just because she didn't want her?
That's just my opinion.
Well, I mean,
that's just my opinion, but it makes sense.
Well, they can't debate. This is the problem: is these people on the left cannot debate facts. They can't. That's why they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anytime there's facts anywhere, you got to run away because, you know, like Ben Shapiro says, you know, my facts don't care about your feelings, and that's what everything that they say is feelings.
Well, you got to call names first, then run away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you call names, and then you hide and say they're racist.
So I mean, like I'm saying, that's just my opinion. But hey, if I was actually writing something, you know, that was supposed to be, you know, changing the history of our country, and then I was going to have to go to court to actually prove it. And I've got a bunch of people actually debating my information with, you know, quotes and facts and everything else. I'd probably step away from that.
But she probably made it on top. You know, going to Howard, that's an Ivy League school, and granted, she's tenured.
She may be making more money there also.
Oh, for sure.
On the opposite end of the spectrum.
I mean, what kind of great life is that where you're tenured? Like, tenured, first of all, tenure shouldn't be a thing, right? Mm-hmm. If you're teaching our kids things in a state university that's funded by our tax dollars, that's laws, why should you not be able to be removed? It's not even just from us. Like, it's the school can't remove them.
That's a good point. Why is Bill Ayers there? Why is Bernadine Dorn there? Why is Peter Stroke there?
Yeah.
You know, all these people, you know, Bernadine Dorn, Bill Ayers blew up police stations. They're teaching at college. Peter Stroke, we know, had the text messages between him and Page talking about taking the president out that they had and working for the FBI. Which I've said before is maybe treason, maybe, don't know.
Well, it's only treason if you're conservative.
Yeah, but, you know, that's what I'm saying. He's actually, you know, he's teaching at a university now, too. So, you've got...
They're communists. Yeah, I mean, they're doing what they're doing for the party. You know? They do what they do for the party, and the party will take care of you.
Here's the thing. So, you got Yuri Bezmenov back in the day saying, you know, 15, 20 years... That's how long it takes.
Much further past the
Well, but here's the point. My point is they're actually moving on to the actual college now. They got through the 15 years or whatever, 20 years to get through high school. Now they're actually moving on to colleges.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens there because in the history of a lot of revolutions, the colleges have been where the revolution starts. Even whether it's good revolution or not. In Russia, you had a lot of college students in the Bolshevik uprising. Whether it's for liberty or for control, the colleges is often where a movement starts. So it'll be interesting to see what happens once they reach this hot spot of a lot of young people who are ready to rebel against whatever's here.
Yeah,
I don't know how it reacts.
And I understand that when I was younger, as you were. You know, I was
a liberal.
Yeah, I was a liberal.
I was a liberal until just a few years ago.
Yeah, and, you know, I was too. And it gets to the point to where, and I'm hoping that the same thing will happen. It's like these people will actually get out in the real world and they have to pay taxes and, you know, they actually have to be responsible and the government's not going to take care of them and they're going to figure out that they've been lied to for the last 22 years.
Well, it makes you a victim, though. It's a very victimhood. It's hard to get out of that, though, especially when now you have all these student loans and blah, blah, blah.
I mean,
it's like now you're a victim still, even if you want to get out of that system.
Right. Well, I understand it, but at that time they don't care. Yeah. You know, that's one thing that I actually was talking to my younger cousin about when he actually started school. And I was talking to him about the differences between high school and college. Yeah. I was like, you're actually paying to go to school now, bro. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you pay before you go. All right? So you can go or you can not go, but they're getting their money, you know, and they're going to pass or fail you. And trust me, they're, you know, some of them will help you out, but a lot of them ain't. You know, and that's where, you know, responsibility needs to actually be taken up and be started at.
They need to do that in high school, though.
But, you know...
high school should be a place where they teach you how to be on your own.
I understand that, but see, that's the thing. There's such a big... That's correct. I'm actually agreeing with you. But the culture is so different between 6 months of your life.
But, dude...
or maybe 3 or 4 months from the time you actually graduate to the time you actually go to college.
It should be. You should have to wait a year.
Well, a lot of people are doing gap years now.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm doing, but it's weird.
The problem, though, whenever they incentivize you not to do that, because you lose state funding if you do that. You don't if you don't go straight through, then you don't get the scholarships for your GPA and that stuff from high school. So that's
There's another reason to homeschool, because I don't have to say I finished high school until I want to. So I can just
That's true.
technically stay in high school until I immediately go to college. So I
Yeah, that's a good point. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that for other people though, that's what it's like if you don't
Right.
go straight through, then now you don't get the state funding or the federal
Right.
whatever, because you're not technically a traditional student
Right.
anymore.
Yeah. But this in around the 1619 project, you got critical race theory and all that stuff now. All of it kind of goes together. You got the National Education Association, which is the biggest union of teachers in the nation, actually supporting CRT now.
Well, yeah, they're just the party lines, dude. You just pray to the
Well, I mean, that's what trips me out about the whole thing, and you
get rid of them, teach them at home. Parents do just a
right.
fine
Well,
job.
I mean, I understand that, but we got to get to the point to where, like charter schools and stuff like that.
School choice should be a thing.
Yeah, school choice, man. We need to get that point out there and everything else. And it's just like, I'm actually, I'm glad I met you now, because I'm very interested to see as you go through college how you're going to change, or how the struggles that you're going to have. So, I mean,
It's an uphill battle. I can't even imagine. It's so easy to be liberal in college. It's just like, whatever. Everyone's partying and doing their own thing. That's a liberal thing. Like, yeah, just do whatever you want. You don't believe in. I mean, you don't even have to worry about God. Just everything that feels good, do it.
Right.
And that's exactly how the school is. I mean, it's just
Right.
whatever
Everybody
you
else
want.
pay for it.
Yeah,
Be more
and if you
specific.
you just change classes, do whatever you feel like doing this today, then just change the major. It's just all very wishy washy.
You want to study gender?
Yeah.
Lesbian dance theory?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and then women's history. Unfortunately, is not just women's history.
it's women's suffrage. I mean,
It's women's.
almost- it's pretty much-
It's feminism, but you teach it. That's where it started at, the liberalism in school.
Yeah, but there's actually kind of like a divide now. I was actually reading an article the
between
other day.
actual feminists,
Yeah,
and
feminists and
liberals.
and the I guess the gender studies or whatever, they're actually kind of at war at the
Because
collegiate academic level.
Because feminists actually believe that women are just equal. They think that women can do everything that a man can do. But the liberals, you want to victimize everyone, because a real feminist doesn't want to be a victim.
And real feminist believes that women are actually objectively women, that they're not something you can change around.
You're not gonna say we're physically dominant, or you can't be a man. They hate that.
Man, I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of cultural stuff that's going on, man. It trips me out to see the difference in just when I grew up. I mean, I've heard when I was your age, I heard everybody say, "Oh man, I remember when I was 20 years old, blah blah blah." And now I'm actually in that seat, and I can't believe, because what we had done, objectively as a nation, has worked. I can't understand. Where we've gotten to a point to where, honestly, I believe that if we had some college students here, and they had been taught, well, you can stick your hand in this fire and it won't burn. They actually believe it. It's actually the cognitive dissonance is actually created. It's like, because I know some of them have got to be sitting there thinking, well, man,
No, you keep them occupied with smoking weed and doing drugs.
Well, I mean, like, I'm hearing this in class, but when I go out here and talk to my dad, it's different.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
they're
It's
raised
just a
to.
bubble there. It's completely different from the real world.
They look to their professors as that's their role model. That's their daddy.
Well, we actually
the
talked
school
about
is their
that.
daddy.
Yeah, we actually talked about that, and that's one of the things they actually
do.
get away from their parents. They get away from that cultural structure.
But if you look at college, it's just all a communist structure. I mean, you're living in the dorms. You're fed by the school. You don't work. I mean, money doesn't actually exchange hands. It's just like they take care of you.
Thankfully, grades are still mostly not communist. I heard of one economics class where all the students wanted to socialize the grades. So they socialized the grades, and everybody ended up with a D average.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
I read that.
You have to have an
actually, too.
incentive structure.
Yeah, that's what
Even
I'm
in
saying. Well,
communism.
Well, what happens is people stop trying. You got the people who actually want to achieve, and they're like, well, man, I'm busting my butt studying and trying to do all this work. But old boy over here's partying every night, drinking beer or whatever, and then he's going to get the same grade I am, and then everybody just like, nah, man.
That's capitalism too. You got to. You have incentive. Humans need incentive. They have to.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much for everything.
Yeah, for everything. But anyway, so we've been talking for a long time.
We just
We're running our mouths. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, guys, I want to say, if you like us and our message resonates with you, hit us up. It's the McMak Podcast. We're on Spotify. Everybody, support us, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do whatever it is you got to do.
Yeah, and share us.
Yeah. Tell your friends, tell your family. do whatever.
And if you want to come on the show, send us a message too.
Yeah, let us know, comments. I'd like to thank Isaac Funderburk.
Yes.
I wish you all the help and all the luck in this journey that you're getting ready to start called your adult life.
We'd like to have you keep coming back too. We'd like
Yeah.
to hear
I'd be
some
interested in doing that.
stories.
Yeah, definitely. And as time goes on, like I say, brother, we're gonna watch you grow.
Okay. Should be interesting. I'll watch myself too.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can
know
do
what's
that.
coming.
You just get a mirror and be like, yeah, I'm growing. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll look
So-
back 20 years from now and watch this episode.
Yeah, and I'll
see
be
how
60 and I'll be
changed.
like, well, you little whippersnapper,
Yeah.
No, man.
Dang, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
We're
it's
getting
great being with
crazy.
y'all.
All right, man. Everybody, peace.